Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Here to deliver another episode of Sports Talk unlike any other, detailing all that's happened and what will happen, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And speaking of back, there's a team in Major League Baseball that seems to be not only on the mend, but maybe back. And back to a point where could they actually go on a run here, overtake a division, and maybe get themselves in good stead when they get to October? And I'm going to say when, because there were a lot of people as early as not even 3 weeks ago. People thought that this team was not going to make the playoffs. People thought that this has just been a disaster from the middle of June till about a week ago. Maybe a little bit more than that, come to think of it. But when we take a look at what has happened to the New York Yankees from the time that they were in first place in the latter part of May, where they had a 7-game lead, and that was over Tampa at the time, where Toronto was nowhere in the picture as far as the AL East goes. And then we know what happened at the end of June into July when the Blue Jays swept the Yankees up in Toronto, and they actually took first place from them because remember, they had a 3.5-game lead. I believe it was 3.5, may have been 3, but the Blue Jays had to sweep in order to take first place away from the Yankees, which they did. And then the Yankees went into the 4th of July weekend, if you recall, playing the Mets, where they lost the first 2 games in that series before salvaging that final game. And then the Yankees have been sputtering pretty much ever since. Yeah, they've had some wins. Yeah, they've done some things. And it's been a situation where the Yankees look like they weren't going to be able to get out of their own way. Whether it's the base running blunders, whether their defense has foiled them, whether their offense, Aaron Judge, remember, he had to go on the IL for 10 days because of that arm issue that he suffered in Toronto in the second series when they lost 2 out of 3. But for this Yankee team coming out of that sweep in Miami, remember that disaster? And then in Texas, they had to sweat and get out of Dodge with a victory on that Wednesday afternoon game, to where the Rangers have just regressed since that point and actually could have overtaken the Yankees in the wild card race at that time. But with all that being said, here we are, a team that was in the beginning of the week in 3rd place. And now, after a 2-game series sweep of the Rays, after a sweep of the Cardinals over the weekend, and winners of 7 of the last 8 and 8 of 10, the Yankees are now, count them, 3 games behind the Blue Jays in the AL East. And it looks like it's going to get better. Mind you, they have a very interesting test this weekend as the Red Sox come to town. And let me review. The Red Sox have only beaten the Yankees 5 of 6 this year, to the point where now they come into the stadium for 4 big games, and they've been sputtering because remember, they had that 7-game winning streak where they were flying high, and you were thinking, oh, geez, maybe they will have a shot to get at the Blue Jays when it's all said and done. But since then, they've gone 3-7 and have certainly taken a few steps back, and now they got to come to the Bronx to see whether or not that they could get back on their bearings to chase the Yankees here, where the Yankees could, I could say bury them, but they'd have to sweep them to bury them. But if they win 3 out of 4, they could separate themselves and get some more breathing room ahead of them by at least 2 games in the standings come late Sunday night, as you're going to see them on ESPN for Sunday Night Baseball. But when we look at this Yankee team, they've been mashing the ball the way we thought the Yankees would. And that leads with Giancarlo Stanton, excuse me. I don't want to call him Giancarlo because it's not Giancarlo, it's Giancarlo Stanton. And here's a guy that obviously missed the first, almost 3 months of the year with the elbow inflammation. And all he's done upon his return is rake, and rake. More home runs. He's just shown and flexed his muscles to some big-time numbers here. What does he have? 14 home runs in a matter of, 40-some-odd games? Maybe it's a little bit more than that. And he's batting well over 300. So for Giancarlo to have that type of batting average, granted it's a small sample size. It's not as if he came back at the end of April or early May, but still, you got to like what you see. We all know that he is a streaky hitter. When he is hot, he is white hot. And when he's cold, he is rock solid frigid. I mean, frozen as it can be. But right now, you got to ride this wave. And you can even argue that when Giancarlo is on, not to say that he's the straw that stirs the drink. We all know that's Aaron Judge. But the thing is that Judge can't do it all by himself. And mind you, he had pretty much carried the Yankee offense from the start of the year up until about the latter part of July, maybe even into early August. And remember, he wasn't with the team because he had the elbow issue where he was on the IL, I believe, that the final couple of days of July. But for Judge, who, as we all know, probably will win an MVP. I get it, Cal Raleigh from Seattle. He's going to probably take some of those votes. But when Giancarlo is on, as you saw in October last year, where he hit all those home runs and won an AL MVP of the League Championship Series. So for Giancarlo to get hot now, where this team now is hoping to ride him and Judge, who has also gotten some big home runs, and the team who has hit 14 home runs in the last 2 days or 2 games, which is a record, 9 on Tuesday night, which they just bloodied and bludgeoned the Ray starting and bullpen as far as their whole rotation goes, if you want to put them in a blender and put them all together. But you gotta like what you see with the Yankees right now, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Yankee fans that are puffing their chest out thinking that, oh, now we're back, here we are. Now, their pitching hasn't been great because Max Fried is going to have a big start this weekend against the Red Sox. Let's see if he could come back from the performance that he had on Saturday against the Cardinals, which the Yankees ended up winning, but still wasn't the Max Fried that they got in April, May, and June. So how you're thinking about the Yankees at this present moment and how the Yankee fan, I'm sure they are just dancing in the streets of New York thinking that, all right, we're back. Now we're going to bury the Red Sox. And when you look at their schedule, it's interesting because they have a soft underbelly upcoming where they play the White Sox. I believe the Nationals first. Let me pull that up real quick. So after this 4-game homestand, or really it's a 7-game homestand, after this 4-game series against the Red Sox, they have the Nationals coming in for 3. Then they go to Chicago, to the south side, to play the White Sox for 4. And I get it, they're pesky, but they should take care of them. And then this is where it gets interesting because then they go to Houston, then play Toronto and Detroit, and then go to Boston. So they have that soft underbelly with Washington and Chicago. Then they have the meat of their schedule where it's it's Houston, Toronto, Detroit, and Boston. And then after that, it is a cakewalk. At Minnesota, at Baltimore for 4, they'll host the White Sox, and then the Orioles to close out the season. So once they get past the Red Sox this weekend, then they have the Nationals as well as the White Sox. Then they have a rough middle stretch, and after that, it's smooth sailing. So even though they have Toronto in the middle of that, and their schedule, I'm not going to say it's tricky, but it certainly is a challenge. I would think they're still going to be a threat when it's all said and done for the Blue Jays. And if I pull up the Blue Jays schedule from here on out, and I'm sure they're going to have a tough go at it here at some point. Right now, they lost 2 out of 3 to the Pirates, if you can imagine. So that certainly didn't bode well as the Yankees inch a little bit closer in the American League East. Now, they go to Miami for the weekend. So they could probably use the Marlins as a punching bag here over the next 3 days after a day off today. Then they host Minnesota and Milwaukee. All right, tough series there. Go to Cincinnati, who they're fighting for a playoff spot. Come to the Bronx there right after that. And this is now the weekend after. This will be the opening weekend of the NFL season where they'll come to New York to play the Yanks. Then they host Houston and Baltimore. Go to Tampa, Kansas City, and then they host Boston and Tampa. So you know what? Their back end of the schedule is pretty easy too because they have Tampa 7 games, Kansas City for 3. Now I understand Kansas City, fringe playoff team, and they've actually played better of late. But their schedule is maybe comparable to the Yankees and maybe not as tough because the Yankees do have to play Detroit, although they come to New York, and as well as play Boston another time because the Yankees have to play Boston 7 times where Toronto only plays Boston once, and that's going to be in their building the next to last series of the year. So I would think the Yankees are going to be in it. The Yankees are, I'm sure, will have their sights set on first place and maybe even a bye. Now, they still have a lot of work to do, but right now you have to be happy for what they've done. And let's see, even last night they had to sweat out that 10th inning there where they brought in Devin Williams. I know, what was Aaron Boone thinking? But you live with it because he was able to get out of it. They had second and third with nobody out there in the bottom of the 10th, and he did not give up a run, and let alone got out scot-free. So that's what you have with the Yankees. Now, are they going to now all of a sudden be the team that everybody expects them to be? Well, I'm sure they're still going to have their base running blunders, and they're still going to play fundamentally poor defense and what have you. But as of right now, you can't say that. You got to put that aside, and you can only hope that the Yankees' trajectory will continue to trend north as opposed to middling around or even worse going south. So that's my start there with the baseball. Then you have another Padres-Dodgers series this coming weekend where the Dodgers yesterday got roughed up. In particular, Shohei Ohtani did not have a good pitching performance, actually took a liner off his thigh to where he'll probably be in the lineup today in the finale against the Rockies before going to San Diego. And then the Giants, who are in San Diego right now, will close out their 4-game series where the Padres right now stand. They're just 1 game behind the Dodgers. I don't know if the Dodgers are going to lose 2 in a row to the Rockies. We'll have to wait and see on that. But if they do and the Padres win, you'll have a flat-footed tie going into Petco Park tomorrow if you're the Dodgers. But how I look at it is that with the Dodgers winning 8 of 10 against the Padres this year and pretty much having their number, albeit 2022 in the division series aside, why would I expect things to change? I would expect that song to remain the same, that the Dodgers will go in there, likely take 2 out of 3, and off they go with the division. Now, I'd like to see what the Padres are going to do in reference to, let's say, even if they are still a game behind, now they would have to sweep in order to keep that lead, because if they were to get 2 out of 3, at worst, they will be tied for first place as of Sunday late afternoon. So if you really want to make it stick, you'd want to sweep to overtake the division, which is what you did last week going into Dodger Stadium, and we saw what transpired there. So to me, this is a series that's all predicated on the Padres. And yes, I could have gotten on the Padres there Monday. To me, I wanted to give the Dodgers their due, and I get it. They've been getting their due time after time after time. But remember, last week, heading into that series against the Padres, they got swept by the Angels of all teams. So to me, it was more on what the Dodgers were going to do, and we saw what they did. So now this series is going to be about the Padres, whether they are tied for first or whether they're a game back. So if they win 2 out of 3, all right, fine. They're tied for first, great. If they lose 2 out of 3, still not good, and especially if the Dodgers do it in dominating fashion. And if the Dodgers pull off another sweep, then you'd have to look at the Padres as frauds. Now, anything can happen come October. We understand that, but I don't think they're going to get swept. I'd be shocked if they get swept. I mean, the Dodgers are going to win, think about it, 11-13 over the Padres this year. Now, it could happen. I'm not discounting that, the Dodgers can't do that, but that would certainly be a telltale sign for San Diego moving forward. But then we've seen this time after time. Remember in '88, the Mets were 10-1 against the Dodgers in the regular season, and what happened in the NLCS that year? We all know what happened. So that's just an example, and I'm sure there are plenty others when it comes to season series and who's done what and who's done this. And watch, Milwaukee and LA will play they could probably go, I guess, in a NLCS. And we know that the Brewers swept the Dodgers 6-0 this year. And then watch the Dodgers return the favor. Maybe not in a form of a sweep, but watch them win in 5, 6, or 7 games. And, of course, those 6 games in a regular season will mean nothing. So that's what you have there as far as the current state of baseball, as far as what's happening on the field. The other thing I want to get to is this realignment. It's not a proposal, it's just a possibility. And I understand this was discussed on Sunday Night Baseball, and I didn't touch on this on Monday's podcast because at the time I was just like, it's just a possibility, whatever. But it got a lot of flames stoked throughout the sports fan, throughout the baseball media, and even sports media for that matter, because of what the realignment would mean. And I know Rob Manfred's going to come out, the commissioner that is, he's going to come out and say that we're looking to expand, whether that's in Salt Lake City for a West Coast team and Nashville for an East Coast team, which that is a telling sign because what he's thinking of is no American League or National League, because his proposal was having a division in the Northeast where you're going to have the Yankees, Mets, Red Sox, and Phillies. And what he would want would be similar to the NFL, where he'll have 4 divisions or 4-team divisions in each league. But the problem with that is that you can't have an American and a National League when you have the Mets and Phillies in the same division with the Yankees and Red Sox, who are American League teams. And I don't want to hear these newfound divisions where it's the AL Great Lakes and the AL Mid-Atlantic and the AL Northeast. To me, I didn't like that. And if I even went through the proposal or went through what this realignment was going to be, you'd spit out your Cheerios, or you'd spit out your whatever it is that you're eating right now, or if you're having a tall boy. I mean, it's just preposterous what was brought up here, and I get it. He wants to cut down the travel. He doesn't want teams to travel and fly all over the place. And as it is, they're going to have to fly everywhere anyway, because it's not as if you're going to have a scenario where, even with the new leagues, I'll call it the new leagues, where you're not going to have the Mets they're still going to play the Dodgers, they're still going to play the Padres, the Giants, etc. So it's not as if you're going to regionalize all these teams to play just in a particular time zone. It's not going to happen. These teams are going to still have to fly everywhere. I understand it may cut it a little bit, but it's not going to cut it completely. And how I look at it is that if this new proposal goes down, where you're going to have, let's say in the other division, and it can't even be National League, American League, because one of those divisions have the White Sox, the Cubs, the Cardinals, and I believe it was the Brewers. So if you're going to have the White Sox in there, and that's going to be a National League, I understand in 98 you had the Milwaukee Brewers go from the American League to the National League, and then before 2013, you had the Astros go from the National League to the American League. But there's going to be so much flip-flopping that you're going to have teams that were in the American League for so long in the National League, you're going to have a number of teams that are just going to go from one league to the other. You might as well just call it the East and West Conference. That's it. Because there's no way they can have an American League and National League anymore, unless you're going to bring in these two expansion teams where you'll have it as 16 teams in each league. And then what I think what baseball should do is you can have interleague, but the interleague will be specific for your in-city or in-state rivals. We all know who they are. I'm not going to break them down if you're a baseball fan. If you're not, all right. Mets, Yankees, Cubs, White Sox, Cardinals, Royals, Dodgers, Angels, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. You got the picture. And then maybe you want to sprinkle in, now I understand this is where you have to worry about the travel. You may have it, you want to do a Yankees, Dodgers, you want to do something like that. All right, fine. But no, just stick it to the regular in-city or in-state rivals. Because then you can have the balance of 16 teams, 4 teams in each division in the National League and American League. You don't have to worry about having an interleague series at least for one series every time out. And you still keep it National League, American League, but you cut back on the interleague. And the only interleague, again, would be just special for those cities. I think that'd be the best way. And you can have more of rivalries in your division where you're going to play these teams maybe the 19 times that we once saw prior to 2 years ago. That's how you realign. And yes, I could break down divisions for you and do that sort of thing, but until you get the expansion, whether you're going to have the one team out west, whether that means Salt Lake will be in the American League and Nashville in the National League, or maybe you flip-flop it where you'll have Salt Lake in the National and Nashville in the American, however it may be. But what Rob Manfred proposed, it's almost like having a Premier Soccer League. Come on, you're going to have those 4 powerhouses, and to use that as an example of Yankees, Mets, Phillies, Red Sox, I mean, really? So you're going to see those teams often enough, and yes, I understand you're going to create big-time rivalries, but after a while, you're going to be sick of seeing the Red Sox and the Yankees a million times over. And I get it that people could say, well, I don't want to see the Braves 19 times. I don't want to see and I'm just using the Braves for now, for the National League, or the Phillies, or the Nationals. Well, we see them enough as it is to begin with, so what difference does it make? But do you want to see the Yankees a million times, the Red Sox a million times, the Phillies a million times? I mean, you already see them as a Met fan, but you get my point. So that's all I'm saying when it comes to baseball and when it comes to realignment. And you know it's coming because before Rob Manfred retires, which I believe is after the 2028 season, he's going to have expansion here. And obviously with the A's moving to Las Vegas before the 28 season, and to have those 2 teams on his watch and to have it 32 teams to break it down that way, That's what you're going to have in Major League Baseball. Now, how it's realigned, we'll have to wait and see. But the early returns, not for, I do not like. No me gusto. So that's what you have there with the baseball. Let me see if there's anything else I need to expound on. Zach Wheeler, he had surgery to remove that blood clot in his right shoulder. His return is still uncertain. Now, I understand that was a procedure that may have been a bit risky. Now, any type of procedure when it comes to your right arm and blood clots, of course, is going to be a bit of a gamble. But if this is going to expedite the process to get him getting back, still no guarantee, as opposed to blood thinners and rest and some minor or ramped up rehab. All right, fine, but yeah, we're still going to have to wait and see. It's not a situation where, all right, he's going to be on the shelf for a month and we'll see him toward the end of September, get a couple of starts under his belt, and then have him ramp up for October. I'm sure that is the big-time hope in Philadelphia, whether you're Rob Thompson, the manager, the front office, and, of course, their Philly faithful. But, again, we're going to have to see how his progression is going to be and how this is all going to unfold, because without Wheeler in October is going to be not only a huge loss for baseball overall, because he's one of the best, if not the best starter in the National League, but their chances of getting back to a World Series could be and will be compromised if he's not going to toe the rubber there game one in an NLDS if they do happen to play in the division series or in the wild card round. So keep that in mind as we move it along. So that's what you have with Zach Wheeler. But other than that, the only thing I can tell you here with the standings, the wild card, as we all know, it's probably going to come down to those three teams in the American League. So it's going to be Seattle, Boston, and the Yankees. Yankees currently have a 2-game in the loss and a game and a half over the Red Sox. And the Red Sox have a half-game lead over the Mariners for the final spot. Then you have the Royals, who are 2 in the loss, 2.5 back. And they actually had won 5 in a row before losing yesterday. So you have to include them. The Guardians as well. I know the Rangers are 2 games under, they're 5 back, but maybe the Rangers have a run in them. Who knows? So that's what you have in the American League. But I think those 3 teams are going to duke it out for who's going to get the home field as the 4 seed. And if it stays today, you'd have Yankees, Red Sox in the wild card round. But we all know they still have what? If I do my math correctly, 69, 57, that's 126. So they have 36 more games left on the schedule. Still a lot of baseball to be played, and a little bit over a month when you think about it. So you have that going on there in the American League. And in the National League, Cubs are in good stead. 5 over the Mets in the loss, 5.5 total. 2 over the Padres. Mets are 3.5 behind the Padres, 3 in the loss. Reds are still 1 game back, but 2 in the loss. And then after that, it's Cardinals, Diamondbacks, 5, 6, etc. So I'm not even going to include them. So in the American League, maybe the Royals or the Guardians could pull off a late charge here to maybe make it 3 teams for 1 spot. We'll have to wait and see. And the divisions are what they are. I talked about the Yankees 3 games back of the Blue Jays. The Tigers, who have played well here as of late, they're going to be fine as they have a 10-game lead and 9 to loss. Remember, they had, I believe the Guardians were like 5.5 when they left Citi Field. What was it, last week? But the Guardians have not played well. And the Guardians have pretty much, I don't want to say they've gone to tank, but remember, they got swept by the Braves. They lost they actually won 2 out of 3 to the Marlins, and that was 2 weeks ago with the sweep of the Mets. But they lost 2 out of 3 to the Diamondbacks. They got swept by the Braves, so right now you can forget about them in the division. But the AL West, you still have Seattle and Houston separated by 2 games there, 1.5 back, as both of those teams have really hit the skids. Think about this. The Mariners, who came into New York, they lost 2 out of 3 to Baltimore. They won that first game against the Mets. And since then, they have not won a game. They lost the back 2, including that Little League Classic in Williamsport, and then got beat up by the Phillies here in Philadelphia the last 3 days. And then Houston didn't do any better. They not only lost 2 out of 3 to the Orioles over the weekend, but they got spanked by the Tigers here, where they got shut out in the last 2 games. And in fact, they had got shut out 3 straight games. And when you even look back, shut out by the Orioles. They won the game in between, but then they got shut out. I mean, where did the Astro offense go? Now, they did put up a couple runs yesterday, but they lost badly, 7-2. So now they have their tails between their legs as they, I believe, will come back home. I'll take a look at the schedule. Not going to forget this week, considering the last 2 Thursdays on the podcast, I did not give you the weekend schedule. So again, hand raised high in the air, my super bad, my apologies. And then in the National League, even though the Mets are a six-pack, I know it's been hot potato. I understand it has been hot potato over the last 3 weeks, but would I be surprised that if the Mets don't make a run here? I wouldn't. Now, they lost last night, and I know for whatever the reason, Carlos Mendoza did not pinch hit Luis Torrens for Ronnie Mauricio. And this is why Mendoza, who has had his bad moments this year, and I was on a podcast in early July where I was asked, what would you give Carlos Mendoza as far as a grade goes? And then was a B. Now I have to say he's a C+, maybe a C right now, because between his pitching, taking starting pitchers out early and bullpen, and then last night not putting in Mauricio where Torrens had 3 ground balls. I mean, just not good for Mendoza, especially here of late, although they try to get out of that malaise that they had there when they lost 14-16. They did win 3 in a row. They lost there last night, and they have to win today. They had to keep winning these series. They won 2 out of 3 against Seattle, win 2 out of 3 here against the Nationals, and then from there, they'll head to the ATL for the weekend against Atlanta, and good riddance for them because for whatever reason, that is their kryptonite. But yeah, have the Brewers and Cubs now. The Cubs, they can actually make up, think about this, 3 games in the standings, but they'd still be 5 back. They lost the opener there of this 5-game series, and then they swept the doubleheader on Tuesday. They won yesterday. So, hey, if they can win 4 in a row to the Brewers, that's actually pretty good in 3 games in the standings. What does that mean overall? Nothing, because I would think the Brewers will win the division, and this is the last time that the Brewers and Cubs will face one another. So I would think that the Cubs will want to go out with a bang. We talked about the Reds, forget about them in the division, but they're 1 game back of the Mets. And we talked about Dodgers-Padres there in the NL West. Now, as far as the schedule goes, it is as follows. Games and series that will conclude today, Milwaukee-Chicago. You also have the San Francisco-San Diego, Cincinnati, and no, they closed out the series last night, right? That's correct. St. Louis at Tampa, I believe they start, that's a 3-game series. That's not a 4, right? I believe that starts tonight. I'm all over the map here, people. I'm trying to get the series closing games. Well, let's look at tomorrow into the weekend even better. Games of note. We know about Yankees, Red Sox, Kansas City at Detroit. Not for the division, but Kansas City, obviously with the wild card. New York at Atlanta. Cleveland at Texas. That's actually a big series. I don't want to say big. But if Texas wants to get closer to Cleveland, and by being close, they got to sweep them. That's a big series for them. San Francisco, Milwaukee, Cubs and Anaheim, Cincinnati, Arizona. You don't really have a lot. You have LA, San Diego, New York, Boston. Those are 2 big series. Cleveland, Texas, beneath that. Kansas City, Detroit, beneath that. And that is your weekend. Colorado, Pittsburgh, nobody cares. Toronto, Miami, I discussed. St. Louis, Tampa, and Minnesota, Chicago, the White Sox. So that's your baseball there as we get closer to the end of a baseball season. All right, now I'm going to turn my attention to the National Football League, and I just got a couple of things to discuss here. First off, I want to talk about Anthony Richardson because there's been a lot of discussion here over the last couple of days regarding the number 4 overall pick out of Florida, where the Colts are now have put him as the number 2 starter behind Daniel Jones, who has been anointed the starter by their head coach, Shane Steichen. And I understand the agent of Richardson was not happy, saying that there's some trust issues with the front office, thinking that it was going to be Richardson's job, or at least it was going to be a fair shake here throughout the course of camp, preseason, etc. But Jones was given the job. And now you have a disgruntled camp of Anthony Richardson as far as maybe his tenure in Indy winding down to a close. Well, here's what I'll say about that. I got nothing against Richardson. We know that coming out of Florida, he was a raw talent. Huge arm, has escapability, can run, we know that. But his inaccuracies, we didn't know much about his health, but now his health has been in question as he's had quite a few injuries since he has started in the league 2 years ago. The more important thing is trust with his coaching staff and teammates, because remember, he tapped out of a game, I think it was in Houston last year, because he said he was too tired. Too tired. Now, I'm sure that was one in the front of the mental Rolodex for the head coach, and I'm sure for the front office too, saying that, wait, can we trust this guy in a big spot where if he's tired or maybe if he has hangnail, who knows? But we don't know what's happening behind the scenes there or what's really going on. Daniel Jones, I know people are going to laugh and say, why are you going to put him as a starter? That guy's a bum. He's bounced around. He's done nothing. Danny Dimes, the nickname, which he certainly doesn't deserve. But listen, Jones has had some success here in the league, albeit for 1 year. But he did take his team to a playoff, won a playoff game in Minnesota. I understand he had Saquon Barkley, but then he does have Jonathan Taylor as his running back here, who is no slouch. But here's my assessment of Richardson. He's still a raw talent. Yes, he could probably throw the football through a car wash and not get it wet. But again, he is not a guy that is an accurate passer, one who gets injured quite often, and you also have to wonder what's between his ears and in his chest. As a guy that could not only carry your franchise for a year, but as a number 4 overall pick to carry you for years to come. And maybe they think that Richardson is not that guy, that Daniel Jones, who is a stopgap right now, but who knows? Maybe he does wonders. Maybe the Colts could be in the thick of things in a rather, let's say, not so stout AFC South. And who knows? They also signed Xavier Howard, the former cornerback of the Miami Dolphins, to shore up that defensive backfield because that has been atrocious and they've been decimated by injuries. So anything can happen. And who knows with Daniel Jones, like I said, small amount of success in the NFL, but maybe knowing that this could be his last shot to latch onto a team as a starting quarterback, because I'm sure if he doesn't do well here, he could bounce around as a backup elsewhere. So this could be curtains for Richardson overall. But the one thing I would say to him, and this isn't a knock on Richardson, he just has to get in the lab and get right. And if he does that, maybe he'll crop up somewhere else to where he'll get a shot. Or who knows, maybe Daniel Jones, not that I'm wishing this, goes down with an injury and here you are week 3, week 4, and Richardson's back in the mix and maybe he thrives in Steichen's offense. Obviously, they're all what ifs. I get that, but Richardson, he has to realize that just because you're a top pick, just because you got your signing bonus and your guaranteed money doesn't automatically give you carte blanche to think that, well, this is my job and nobody's going to come to take it. I'm sure he's learned that now, and who knows what his agent is planning in his ear. I'm sure he's getting a lot of motivation. Oh, they're counting you out. They're like, all right, fine. You can use that as a little chip on your shoulder, but when it matters, money on the line, you got to stand and deliver. And that's what he's going to have to do here. So maybe he looks at this as getting knocked down, but he can still get up, whether that's here in Indy or elsewhere. That remains to be seen. But his past has shown that right now, the present, it's not about him. Now, if Jones goes out, like I mentioned, with an injury and he has an opportunity to seize, that's another story. But even if he doesn't seize that opportunity, or Daniel Jones plays all 17 games and they're in the mix for a 7 seed in the AFC, then Richardson's going to be bye-bye. And he's going to have to showcase his talent elsewhere. And what that means for his future, considering what the body of work that we've seen in Indianapolis, is not very impressive. So, as I mentioned before, and I'll say one last time, Anthony Richardson, get back in the lab. Work hard. Work on that accuracy. Work on just getting your body right, mind right, spirit right, etc. And maybe things will pan out. Because if you don't do that, chances are they won't. And I don't know what to make of this bullet through the window of Andy Reid. I'm going to spend literally 60 seconds on this. This happened last May in his office where a bullet went through. I think it went to the wall. I don't know if he was in his office. I didn't really get into the story. Thankfully, nobody got hurt or perished with this bullet going through the window. But, I mean, really, did somebody have it out for Andy Reid? I hope that wasn't the case, or it's not the case. That's why I can't really speak on it. So, listen, hopefully that's the only time it's happened. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. And all I'll say is hopefully it doesn't happen anytime in the future. Sticking with football, helmet and shoulder pads still on. college football starts this weekend, people, but you only had the one big game, and it isn't really big. I'm not going to say it is, but you do have two ranked teams. Iowa ranked 22nd, Kansas State 17th. They are the teams to play in Dublin. Remember last year you had Georgia Tech and Florida State, where Georgia Tech won on a last-second field goal, and Florida State was just in disarray, especially when they had the ball late in the fourth quarter as they were trying to march on down the field. They were ultra-conservative. They tried to kick a long field goal, which went right and left, and then Georgia Tech went down the field. I believe there was a key third down penalty in the process. I remember watching the game in a beer garden, and then Georgia Tech kicks a last-second field goal to upset the Seminoles there on that opening, you want to call it, quote-unquote, opening weekend in college football. I mean, that's the only game you have. It's 12 noon on ESPN. I know you have a couple of primetime games. I believe the nightcap is Stanford and Hawaii, and I believe it's on CBS. So I believe that's a 7:30 game. You may have another primetime game there. I don't even think it's on ABC. I think it's on Fox, for that matter. The following week is when you're going to have the wall-to-wall college football there on Saturday, and then you have the Sunday night game, which I believe is Notre Dame, Miami. I'll have a little bit of a preview to kind of see the lay of the land. We all know it's going to be top heavy, so we think where when we get to mid to late December, the 12 teams that will make the playoff, etc., and obviously under the new format, no, not like last year. If you win your conference, you get an automatic bye. Thankfully, they're not going to do that. It's the teams that are going to rank 1 through 4 that'll have the bye, and we all know from there how that will shake down. But we'll talk more college football there next week as we get ready for another college football season. And right, should I spend even a second? I talked about this the other day, but the fine, the $30 million to the University of Michigan, to my guy Cole out in Michigan. Shout out to you, my man, who's on YouTube during my live streams, etc. And of course, shameless plug, Wednesdays, 12 noon Eastern time, Mondays and Thursdays at 9:30 or roughly 9:30 a.m. And that is a pop-up. That's just a surprise one that I do a podcast pregame. Join me on my lives. Subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff if you can. I'd really appreciate it. So with the Wolverines, we saw this 2 years ago with Harbaugh. Now Sharon Moore gets a suspension as well, which to me, it's comical. I mean, really, they should just have taken a playoff appearance or a bowl appearance and call it a day, because really, what is a slap on the wrist? The fine is hefty, I get that, but the suspensions with the sign stealing scandal, I mean, we've been down this road before with Harbaugh, which to me mattered more now than it does here, because Michigan is not expected to do anything close to what they've done, especially during the Jim Harbaugh era, but that's what all it is, and that's all I'm going to say to that. So let me move it along real quick as I lace up the high tops to go to the NBA. Just a couple of quick notes here. Number one, John Wall, the former number 1 overall pick, 2011, no, maybe in 2010, with the Kentucky Wildcats. And remember, that team went 40-0 before losing to Wisconsin in the Final Four. And that was a team that obviously was chasing history. And that was the John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins. Who else was on that team? Was Michael Kidd-Gilchrist on that team? He may have been on the 2012, the Anthony Davis team. But I know it was DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall. They were on that team, which they were superior. They beat up everybody. We know that John Wall was a blur. Unfortunately, was with the Wizards for most of his career. And obviously the Wizards, other than one shining moment in the 2017 playoffs where they got to a conference semifinal and they pushed the Celtics to a Game 7. If you recall, that was the Kelly Olynyk game where he hit 1,000,000 threes, scored 24 points, and the Celtics won a Game 7 before getting smoked by the Cavaliers in the conference final. But for Wall, here was a guy that coming out of college was going to be that Allen Iverson, blur, even quicker, first step, break you off the dribble, in transition, forget about it. The guy was lightning quick, and then had his moments, was third-team All-NBA one year, made 5 All-Star teams, wasn't really the player that a lot of people thought he was going to be as far as maybe being that Hall of Fame talent. Now, I understand these guys getting a Hall of Fame pretty much with just one big season, but and to me, he's not a Hall of Famer. So, and that's not to throw cold water on him on the cusp of his retirement, but injuries, whether it was knee injuries, and I believe he blew out an Achilles on top of that, going down the steps where he's trying to avoid his dog, or maybe he broke an ankle, something along those lines. But Wall, now he's going to throw his hat in the media ring. I believe it's going to be on the Amazon Prime studio shows, whether it's pre and post game, etc. But I know I saw a logo on one of his social media posts in reference to that. So for those who like Walt, you can still follow him and watch him there when it comes to the NBA coverage. So shout out to you, John Wall. Thoughts, prayers for a very good second half of your now NBA broadcasting career, as your playing days, of course, have now come to a close. And then you have Rick Carlisle getting an extension, no terms disclosed as far as years and amount, but I'm sure it's a pretty penny considering what he's done, taking that team to the NBA Finals last year, conference finals prior to that. We know no Tyrese Halliburton, so we'll see what he does for this year. And that's pretty much your NBA. And as far as the WNBA, you had the Liberty finally beat the Lynx. And I know I've talked about them, it seems, ad nauseum here. Excuse me, as my nose is itching if you're watching on YouTube. So I'm trying not to pick my nose. I know I digress here if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or on the website, JAYREELZ.com. But for the Liberty, they beat the Lynx finally. Remember, they lost to them Saturday, and they played them here over the course of a 9-day stretch 3 times, and they also played 3 weeks prior to that. So Tuesday night, thanks to Sabrina Ionescu, who had a big performance there and was able to salvage their season series to where they lost the first 3, but they got this one here. Now, what does that mean for the Liberty if they do face the Lynx again in a WNBA final? I don't know if it's going to mean much. I'm sure psychologically, right this very moment, at least it's a bit of an exhale. Now, we still have to wait for Breanna Stewart to come back. And when you have Stewart and Ionescu, obviously that's a big-time tandem there. But we all know that the Lynx, they're also missing 2 of their top players as well. So we would only have to wait and see if both teams are healthy, if they do happen to meet again in a WNBA final. But I really believe that the Lynx, obviously with the best record and them having the top seed and them will have the home court, I look at it as just a blip on the radar, especially if you're a Lynx fan. Maybe for the Liberty, all right, we beat them, fine. We didn't get swept. But like I mentioned earlier, maybe if they would have gotten swept and faced the Lynx in a final, they would have looked at it as like, oh, this is going to be a wrap. It's going to be a 5-game series. They're going to win 4-1 because, again, I believe this is the first year they're going to expand to a 7-game final series. But for what it's worth, at least the Liberty showed that they belong on the same court, and they have been competitive against them. I know in that first game at Barclays Center, they had a 7-point lead going into the fourth. Well, I actually had, let me think. I want to make sure I get this correct. I believe they had a 7-point lead going into the second half, and then they went on a run midway through the third quarter and then just overtook the Liberty from that point on. And then they had a 1-point lead in Minnesota on Saturday before the Lynx took over. So it's not as if they've been just totally dominated by the Lynx here. And again, this is no Nafisa Collier among a couple other players, but Collier, I say Collier because I just think of like Messier and Battier. So Nafisa Collier, just to enunciate her name correctly. So, yeah, how I look at it is that the Lynx are still, I think, the superior team. But I don't want to say superior, that may be a bit too strong, but they are the better team. And I would think if you're a betting person that you would probably select the Lynx over the Liberty in a final series. So we could talk about that win being important for the Liberty for right now, but what does that mean for late September? Probably not a lot. And you also have Paige Beckers, 44 points, and WNBA rookie record for the Dallas squad. And Beckers, you would think going away is going to be your WNBA rookie of the year. I mean, 44 points. I mean, think about that. That hasn't been done in, 27, 28 years that the league has been in operation. So congratulations to her. And no Sophie Cunningham for the remainder of the season for the Fever. And that's a huge blow considering that they do not have Caitlin Clark, and who knows when she's going to come back. And right now I know their playoff hopes are teetering here. So we'll have to see as we get into September where the Fever stand and if Caitlin Clark does return to see whether or not the Fever have any shot at getting to the postseason. And even more importantly, if they're going to have Caitlin Clark back, healthy and ready to go to kind of salvage the season and maybe qualify for the playoffs. So that we'll have to have our eyes and ears peeled for that. Now, one last thing. Nothing going on in the NHL. I'm only bringing this up. I hate to bring this up, but what the hell? Only because I saw this yesterday and I said, you know what? Maybe this is worth discussing. So in November, I think the 14th is the date. Let me pull this up to be exact. Now, Jake Paul, as we know, listen, forget about the show. What was I going to say here? Forget about the sideshow that he is. And I get it that he has boxed. And we saw the Tyson fight, which was a joke. And Julio Cesar Chavez, another joke. And he's going in the ring as these exhibitions. And now it's a situation where he's actually going to fight someone of note on November 14th. And that is Gervonta Davis. And Davis, who I understand, forget about the stuff outside the ring. But Davis, as we all know, short in stature, but packs a wallop. And I wonder if there's going to be people that are going to watch. But here's the one thing. The big asterisk, the caveat that I would really watch out for when it comes to this fight. If you really think this is going to be of note, and I understand, Jake Paul has not gotten in the ring with anybody close to the talent and ability of Gervonta Davis. And I want to hear Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson's 58 years old. If he was fighting Tyson at the time he was Tyson, different story. But I'm planting the seed now as a receipt for later on. If they're going to go in and it is no holds barred, not MMA people, a boxing match, where it's not going to be calculated, it's not going to be orchestrated, it's not going to be, dare I even say fixed. I won't even go there. But you know that if Gervonta Davis is going to go in there as if he was fighting for a title belt or fighting to defend a title belt, then that's one I'm going to have to watch. But I would think in every right frame of mind, whether you're Jake Paul's party or the promoter who's putting this up, that they don't want to see an embarrassment here. And this isn't knocking Jake Paul's ability to box, but I'm sorry. Even the people that you fought along the way, that they've had ability, now you're going into a guy that has some serious ability. And all I'll say is this, and I'll close out on this note. If it is going to be a situation where, yeah, I'm going in there looking to fight him. This isn't going to be a sideshow. This isn't going to be an exhibition that, yeah, all right, no. Or dance around the ring for however 8 rounds or whatever it is. If that's going to be the case, nobody's going to watch. And all I'm going to say is this. If that's going to be the case, you better back it up. Because if you're going to come out and say that, yeah, Gervonta and I, we're going to go at it. This is going to be a boxing match. Get your popcorn ready. Let's go. And then on November 14th, and it's anything but that, then sadly, Jake Paul, all of these exhibitions that you've had coming up to date is just going to prove to myself and everybody out there who's watched boxing forever and has followed the sport, despite it being on pretty much its last legs and on life support, well, you're going to look like a fraud. That's all I'm going to say. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review. I would sincerely appreciate it on Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com, the website. Of course, the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. As you know, it's a little engine that could scenario with yours truly. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, trying to make my mark here in this podcast universe, podcast space, content creator space, channel, etc. So please share with your family, friends, foes, frenemies. Take a screenshot, send it to me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast. I'm stuttering here. Or Instagram, JAYREELZ only. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you could do so at any of the aforementioned social media accounts. The JAYREELZ podcast, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, JAYREELZ on Instagram, and the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals. Because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. In the blood, in the DNA, as I like to say, talking sports since birth. And as an independent content creator, doing what it is that I love, sharing my passion, energy, joy with you guys and gals. It brings me nothing but great pleasure to do so, to have this platform, to not only be credible, but be engaging, to be entertaining, to be knowledgeable, and more importantly, to show the world that I'm built for this, that I'm not going anywhere. Year and a half doing this full time, still waiting for checks to clear and cash, but that's all right. In due time, and with your help, that will happen. Because one more time, as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and camera, I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens in the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, boxing ring, octagon, tennis court, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Center, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.